34 years ago, in 1985, I reported the sexual abuse and rape of me by my father that took place nearly daily over a period of 4 years when I was aged 10 through 14. I had a school friend and I told her what was happening, and she told me that it was very wrong, and I was shocked. That year I left home, I went into live-in care, told staff and made a statement to the police. He denied it, made no statement, and when interviewed, no further action was taken on lack of evidence. 2 years later, he admitted the abuse to my mother, whose first words to me were, "I can't believe you could do this to me." My sense is that she was groomed. My social worker visited them both, and he admitted the abuse to her in front of his wife. I had been adopted into that family when I was a baby, and a year later, in 1988, I tracked down and found my birth mother. I was still in care, and so my social worker went to visit her. My birth mother was a savvy woman. Still is. She put a tape recorder behind the sofa and recorded the conversation. The social worker said that yes, he abused me, but also that I abused him, that I enjoyed the power, and that I stopped it when I no longer got anything out of it. My birth mother challenged her and said she was 11. The social worker said there were no other children at risk in that house, and I work in child psychiatry, and child abuse is my specialty. For decades, I tried to push the case to court, going back to the police several times, making multiple statements. In 2004, I went again to the police and said, look, he admitted it to my social worker. Surely that's enough to get it into court. The police went to the social worker and asked her, and she denied that my father had admitted the abuse to her. The police came back to me and said, social workers denied it, and I gave them a copy of the tape. The social worker suddenly remembered all the details and handed over her files, but it took the police another 7 months to try and get her to make a statement. After that, the Director of Public Prosecutions still decided not to prosecute. Finally, in 2016, after repeatedly chasing up the police, the Director of Public Prosecutions reopened the case, and 20 sample counts of child sexual assault and rape were put to my father. He admitted 18 of them and was sentenced last month to 5 years in prison. He will serve 2.5 years of those. I was one of the lucky ones. Of the 100% of known cases of child sexual abuse, 90% don't go to court. Of all of the cases that do, only 8% get convictions. That is 0.8% of all known cases of child sexual abuse that get convictions. Let that sink in for a second. And that doesn't speak to whether or not those sentences are commensurate. If I asked any sane person in Ireland if they knew a child who was raped by their parent, by their father, if a sentence of 2.5 years was commensurate, no sane person in Ireland would say yes. The statistics don't include all the cases that aren't reported, where victims feel too intimidated, fearful, or humiliated to come forward. Most victims say the degradation suffered by other victims in cross-examination in court is the main reason for not speaking out. When only 0.8% of all known cases of child sexual abuse get convictions, this is proof that the system is rigged against these victims of intimate abuse. So how do we change the system? We need a complete overhaul of the criminal trial format. Long overdue. Currently, we have the adversarial trial, which pursues a legal truth, what can be proven beyond reasonable doubt, and ignores an actual truth, what actually happened. This means the system is unjust. The adversarial trial is combative, degrading for the victim, a disincentive for other victims to come forward, a facilitation for plea bargaining, as happened in my case, that removes charges and reduces culpability and sentencing for the accused. My father should have got life imprisonment. He's going to walk after 2.5 years. And the adversarial trial is the method by which victims and survivors are mere witnesses, with no say in how the cases are conducted, despite how their lives will be impacted by the outcome of the trial. We can replace the adversarial trial with an inquisitorial trial, as is the case in other jurisdictions such as France and the Netherlands. The inquisitorial trial is a fact-finding mission that seeks to find the actual truth, not the legal truth. All parties put forward their understanding of the facts, and a judge, not a jury, decides what the actual truth is and decides the outcome, the guilt, innocence, and sentence. The inquisitorial trial is not a fix-all. We can learn from other jurisdictions around the world what works well and what doesn't. Be mindful that the system is rigged. Not just adversarial trials, so judges and other lawyers need specific training in sexual violence crimes against minors in order to be effective in gutting the pervasive pro-paedophilic and victim-blaming prejudice in the legal social welfare system in our society currently. Every time a barrister cross-examines on the basis of reliability or credibility and chooses to victim blame, this agenda is the system being groomed by a paedophilic or predator agenda. We need vigilance at every turn to eradicate this ubiquitous agenda of patriarchal entitlement, whether it shows up in courts or elsewhere. Government efforts focusing on how to tweak the adversarial trial system is missing the point. Tom O'Malley in NUI Galway is investigating legal reform, looking at issues for victims in court. This skirts the issue. The adversarial trial succeeds in securing so few convictions that it cannot be tweaked to make justice accessible. The system needs a root and branch overhaul in order to incentivize victims coming forward, to end the degradation of victims in cross-examination, to remove plea bargaining that reduces charges against the defendant and results in puny and archaic sentences for heinous crimes. Whether or not a victim gives evidence from behind a screen, or if she or he has victim support buddy with her in court, will not change that 0.8 statistic. The 0.8% figure is the number we must focus on to drive change. That's the legal system. Outside of the legal system, what can we do to help change other systems in place, enabling child abuse? Everything we've discussed so far is a reactive approach, focusing on the victims. We also need a proactive approach. Society is sitting on its hands when it comes to paedophilia generally. We find it too toxic to understand, can't get our heads around it, so we don't try and we don't respond. Sex-beast headlines are common reactions, but they fail to make headway in dismantling this hidden, insidious scourge that feeds off 1 in 3 children in our society today, destroying lives and our collective empowered future. We need a spotlight on predators, not just victims. We need to address paedophilic predators head on, shine the light on what paedophilia is, the patriarchal entitlement that drives predators to act out their sexual violence on children. Right now, society is effectively saying to predators, with that statistic, carry on. The chances you'll be caught or convicted are so slim that child sexual abuse is effectively legal in this country. And not just this country. Other countries, however, run catchment programs to encourage would-be predators and predators to come forward and seek help. In Germany, there are state-paid ads on buses and what have you, pictures of men, a man looking at a child, and the strapline reads, "Do you like children too much? Ring this number." Most predators will not be healed from this type of help, but they can be helped to join the dots and have their worst case scenario, prison, social outcasts, loss of contact with their family, connected mentally with the behaviour to give them pause. These programmes are of limited help. Professionally run programmes here in Ireland, in England and in the United States were shelved after it was found that they served to teach men how to stay one step ahead and not get caught. In other cases, participants reoffending increased. Not all paedophiles are predators. There's a gradation. Some paedophiles can be helped. Some would-be predators may be stopped. Some will not. Predators of intimate abuse are often sociopaths who feel no guilt for their actions, often minimizing their behavior, with zero empathy for their victims, often victim blaming and grooming entire families while they continue with impunity. My father's probation report said his attitude towards me was callous. In a police statement, a cousin said, my father said to her, "Yes, I did it, but what harm did it do?" We must work with the paedophiles whom we can help and expose the truth about paedophilia at every turn to educate ourselves about the nature of it, its perpetrators, the impact on victims, and the systemic bias permeated throughout our legal, societal, and cultural systems, enabling the sociopathy behind this endemic, insidious norm. So that's about society and the legal system and how it's enabling child abuse. But what can we do as survivors? Healing from trauma is about making the unconscious conscious. Trauma is a form of toxicity living in the body. It unconsciously spills out into our lives when we can't or won't address it. That's why so many people with trauma in their stories have disheveled lives. The body is trying to rid the system of the trauma by processing it unconsciously in that person's relationships, how they spend their time, often self-medicating or self-harming, and how they spend their lives. Without healing that trauma, we run the risk of repetition wounding, where we recreate old dynamics in our adult lives over and over in order to clear the first imprint of trauma from the past. We need to heal that original trauma. So how do we heal wounds? In my experience as a healer, there's 3 things you need to do. You need to heal the original wound, which is clearing unprocessed trauma out of the system. You need to remove foreign energy out of your system, family inherited trauma from intergenerational trauma down the line, or residue from predators. And in 100% of all cases that I work with adult survivors of child sexual assault, they all have dark energy in their system from the predator that results in debasement of self-worth, sense of shame, feeling dirty, classic examples. We need to heal those. So how do we, and the third thing is to restore lost energy lost through the trauma. Wounds are unmet needs. We need to meet those needs in ourselves. We need to heal the wounds by being unconditionally loving to a loving adult to our younger selves that our younger selves craved back then. We need to rescue, nurture, and empower the fragmented parts of ourselves, the fragmented, shattered parts of the psyche within the self, which are our younger selves still caught in the trauma loops forged in the moments of assault, betrayal, rape, and loss, etc. But therapy alone is not enough. We also need to retrieve energy that we lost in the trauma and clear out foreign energy that doesn't belong to us. We need to make the self whole, retrieve the essence of the lost self by trauma, that's lost by trauma. Part of me died, I felt derealized, I felt like I wasn't all here. We do that by looking for, reclaiming, and reintegrating those parts back into ourselves. And we need to remove the foreign energy as I described. But what can we do as a society? We need to no longer see the patriarchal norms as acceptable. Once you see them, you can't unsee them. You need to step out of the domination trance that we heard about yesterday. Step out of the mindset and thinking that normalizes these statistics as normal or unchangeable. We need a radical overhaul in our own sense of power and action to move out of intractable and into change. We need to empower ourselves and our children by becoming informed and acting accordingly. We need to know the statistics of child abuse and know how endemic it is in the world. We need to teach consent to our kids. It's not okay for people to hug you if you don't want that. And I will ask you, before wiping your vagina after you've used the potty, your body is yours. We need to educate ourselves at events like this one. Spread that knowledge and speak candidly about this hidden, festering sexual violence against kids. Know that it is everywhere and that it cannot hide in plain sight, with silence as its enabler. If we all speak out about it, use your voice. Call it. Every time you see paedophilic agenda in the media, she was asking for it, what harm does it do, Lolita loved it. And be vigilant against its pervasive force. And finally, recognise that the paedophilic agenda is fed and sustained by patriarchy and its entitlement, and will only be dismantled by dismantling patriarchy from our society, culture and thinking in a systemic and deliberate way. Thank you for everything you're doing.